Have you ever wondered what it was really like to be an ancient ape? Not the king of the jungle type, but the cold, wet, struggling kind that barely survived. Tonight, we're going to slow things down, way down, and drift into the forested past, where survival meant clinging to trees, dodging predators, hoping the fruit wouldn't rot before you reached it. Before we begin, let me ask, what time are you watching this video? Is it early morning or late at night? Tell me in the comments below. I read every one. Now, get comfortable. Close your eyes if you like, and let's begin. It is easy to imagine a jungle as a paradise. Green vines stretching through the sky, sunlight filtering softly through high leaves. But for ancient apes, the jungle was a cage of constant threats. You wake up with the sun barely brushing the horizon. Your fur is wet, not from rain, but from the endless dampness of a world that never dries. The canopy above traps the moisture, turning everything into a steam bath of mildew and crawling things. You are hungry, and there is no guarantee you will eat today. The fruiting trees are unpredictable. Some bear nothing for months. Others are already stripped by birds, rodents, and stronger apes that got there before you. You must climb, but the branches are slick with moss, and there is no safety net. One wrong step, and you are fallen, not onto soft leaves, but hard roots, jagged rocks, and thorn-covered vines. The jungle is alive with noise, but it is not friendly chatter. Every call could be a threat. Every rustle might be a predator, a snake curling silently through the underbrush, or worse, a big cat with eyes that shine even in shadow. You move carefully, arms aching from the climb, your feet slipping every few steps. The sun rises higher, but the heat never brings comfort, only exhaustion. There is no shelter, not really, only what you can find for the moment. A cluster of branches wide enough to rest on, a hollow tree that does not already hide something worse. You live in a group, but even that is no protection. Other apes steal your food, push you from the safest spots, growl when you get too close. The weak do not last long. The weak do not eat. The weak do not survive. And you are not strong. You reach a tree with sour berries. They burn your mouth, but you eat them anyway, 'cause the ache in your belly has become a dull roar, and you know it will only get worse. Suddenly, there is a scream, high and sharp and close. You freeze, looking around, hoping it was just a bird, but deep down you know it was not. Another ape, attacked, dragged off, or maybe fallen. And if you go to help, you could be next, so you turn away and climb again. The afternoon brings the insects. They bite, they crawl, they swarm. There is no escape. Your skin is raw from scratching, your fur full of mites, your eyes red and itching. Still you move, because stopping means death. You look for a better place, a higher branch, a cooler patch of shade, a fruit no one has found yet. You find none of these. Instead, you find another group, larger, meaner. They notice you. They see what little food you have, and they come closer. You try to flee, but they are faster. One hits you, hard, a warning. Another takes your fruit and pushes you back. You do not fight. You cannot. You wait until they leave, your body aching, your pride gone, your hunger even worse than before. Evening falls, and with it, the chill. The jungle does not stay warm once the sun disappears. The wet cold creeps into your bones. Your fur offers no help. You curl up on a high branch, hoping it will hold through the night, hoping nothing climbs up to find you. You listen to the sounds in the dark, a low growl in the distance, the flap of wings above, the hiss of something sliding below. Your heart beats fast. Your eyes dart at every movement. There is no deep sleep here, only brief rests interrupted by fear. And when you do sleep, your dreams are not peaceful. They are filled with falling, with teeth, with shadows that never lift. Morning comes, barely different from the night. Light filters through, but the sky is still gray, still wet. Your limbs are stiff, your mouth dry. You have survived one more night, but that is all. There is no reward, no celebration. It's just another day of climbing, searching, avoiding, surviving. This is your life, every day, every hour. It's not a paradise, not a golden age. It's endless noise, endless danger, and the constant fear of being too slow, too weak, too late. The jungle is not your friend, it is your test. And most days, you are barely passing. The ache starts before your eyes even open, a dull twisting deep in your belly that never really goes away. Hunger is the first feeling of the day, and the last. You live with it like a shadow, always there, sometimes sharper, sometimes quieter, but never gone. Your body is thin, not lean in a strong way, but worn down, like bark peeled from a tree. You stretch your arms and legs, joints cracking, muscles sore from yesterday's endless movement. You were hoping today would be different, but it won't be. You already know that before you take your first breath of the damp, heavy air. You scan the trees above, searching for fruit. You look for color, any burst of yellow or red against the green, but there is nothing. The trees are bare, or already stripped. You climb anyway, because not climbing means starving. You grip the nearest trunk, rough bark biting into your hands. The moss makes your feet slide, and your fingers tremble from weakness. Still, you push upward, one limb at a time, hoping, always hoping. Every new branch brings a new disappointment. The fruit you do find is half rotted or crawling with bugs. You eat it anyway. You pick around the insects when you can, but sometimes you chew right through them. The taste doesn't matter, only the feeling of something in your stomach. It is never enough, never even close. You need so much more than you can find. Your body burns through what little you do get, almost instantly, like dry wood in a fire. You never feel full, only slightly less empty. Midday is worse. The heat presses down, turning the jungle into a furnace. The shade does little to help. The humidity traps everything. You sweat constantly, your fur slick against your skin. And still you search. You try the lower trees now, hoping the birds have missed something. You check near the ground, even though you hate it there. The predators are always closer to the earth. You hear something move in the ferns behind you, and your heart jumps. You freeze, barely breathing, and then you move again, faster, climbing the nearest vine back to the trees above. You do not feel safe even there, just slightly safer. Hunger still drives you. You consider stealing from a nearby group, but that carries its own risks. Fights are short and brutal. You have the scars to prove it. A bite here, a broken finger there, all from food you never even got to taste. You see a younger ape drop a fruit by accident, and you scramble for it, snatching it up before he can realize what happened. He cries out, but does not chase you. You eat the fruit quickly, barely tasting it, just trying to swallow before someone takes it back. Your stomach protests. Too fast, too sour, but you keep going. You cannot afford to slow down. Later, you chew on bark. It gives you splinters in your gums, but it keeps your jaw moving, keeps your body thinking it's doing something. You pick through old nests, hoping to find forgotten scraps. Sometimes you find shells or half-crushed seeds, and sometimes you find nothing but the smell of another ape. You are not proud, but pride has no place here, only hunger. As the sun lowers, the jungle dims, but the ache inside you does not. It sharpens with the cooling air, a cruel reminder that night brings no food. You scan the treetops one last time, but it is pointless. The fruiting trees have been quiet for weeks, and they may stay quiet for weeks more. You do not know. You have no map, no plan. Only instinct and the endless dull roar of need inside your gut. You return to your perch, an old branch that has held you many nights. You curl into yourself, trying to ignore the growls that come not from the forest, but from your own body. You chew a leaf, bitter and useless, but it distracts you for a moment. You think of food in your dreams, vast piles of sweet fruits, juicy and bright, hanging low and heavy. But even in dreams, you cannot reach them. You wake with the taste of nothing on your tongue. You look at the stars through gaps in the canopy and wonder if the apes in other places suffer the same way. Maybe they do, maybe they do not. All you know is this endless search, this daily failure, this slow shrinking of your body and your hope. Hunger is not just a feeling anymore. It is a part of you, a constant companion, a reminder that nature gives little and takes much, and tomorrow it will start again. Night fell often without warning in the dense forests of the Miocene. Shadows stretched long and deep between the towering trees. For the ancient ape, survival wasn't just about food or shelter. It was about the constant battle against the unseen. In the darkness, danger became invisible, and that meant terror could strike without a sound. While modern humans can build fires, lock doors, or sleep behind walls, ancient apes had no such luxury. Their homes were the branches high above ground, fragile nests woven out of leaves and twigs, balanced precariously on swaying limbs. A single gust of wind could dismantle their bed. One slip in the dark meant a fall that could break bones or worse. There were no second chances out here. Broken limb meant certain death. Nesting wasn't peaceful either. No matter how carefully a nest was made, it offered little protection. A serpent could slither into the tree unnoticed. A nocturnal predator, like a saber-toothed feline or large owl, might pounce from above or below. The night was filled with soft rustles and sudden cracks. Every sound could mean a threat. Sleep didn't come easily. Instead, it came in short, light bursts, constantly interrupted by the need to open one eye and scan the shadows. There was also the cold. Though these apes lived in warm climates, nights in the forest could drop in temperature. With no fur coats thick enough to trap real warmth and no way to make fire, the ancient ape huddled with others or, alone, shivering under the stars. Imagine trying to sleep through the chill with nothing but your arms to hug your chest. Every morning brought stiff joints and weary limbs. Then came the rain. When clouds rolled in, they didn't offer gentle drizzles. Torrents fell without mercy. Trees shook. Branches snapped. Nests were torn apart mid-storm. And with no permanent shelter, the ancient ape had no choice but to rebuild after every downpour. There were no roofs, no dry ground, just wet fur, cold skin, and slippery bark. Climbing trees during or after a storm was treacherous. One wrong grip and that was the end. Even on dry days, the forest was a brutal maze of hazards. Thorns tore its skin, insects bit into flesh. Leeches clung to ankles and necks. Every bite could bring infection. And without modern immune support, even the smallest wound could fester. Scratches weren't minor annoyances, they were threats to life. Food, while abundant, wasn't always easy to get. Fruit could be high up, far beyond reach. Nuts needed to be cracked with strong jaws or tools they hadn't yet mastered, and meat, if any, meant risk. It required climbing down to the forest floor where more dangers lurked, but even up high, competition was fierce. Other primates, birds, or rodents wanted the same fruit. Fights could break out over a single ripe fig, and ancient apes weren't always the victors. Social life didn't make things much better. Living in small groups had its advantages, but it also brought stress. Hierarchies formed. Some apes dominated, others submitted. You were born weak or fell behind, you'd face aggression. A misplaced gesture, a wrong glance, or even a stolen piece of fruit could mean being chased, beaten, or driven out. Exile was a death sentence. A lone ape had little chance. Predators noticed stragglers. A solitary scream in the jungle meant someone had fallen behind and likely wouldn't return. The pressure to belong wasn't just emotional, it was survival instinct. Then there were the young. Motherhood was no gentle process. Giving birth in the treetops was terrifying. A misstep during labor could be fatal. Even after a successful birth, the infant was fragile. It had to cling to its mother constantly. If it let go while she leaped between branches, it fell. If she was attacked, so was the baby. There were no midwives, no soft beds, just gravity, teeth, and time. In males, their fate was no kinder. To mate, they had to prove dominance. Fights could be vicious. Teeth flashed. Bones cracked. If a male lost, he'd be exiled or killed. Even if he won, he had to protect his status constantly. One weak moment, one injury, and a younger rival would take his place. There was no rest in power. Even the trees themselves became enemies at times. While they offered height and safety from predators, they weren't always stable. Parasites, rot, and storm damage could bring a massive branch crashing down without warning. Entire ape families could be crushed in an instant. The very home they relied on could turn into a death trap. And yet these apes endured. They didn't thrive because the world was kind. They survived because they adapted, slowly, painfully. Each generation carried forward instincts honed by fear. They learned to spot danger faster, to bond tighter, to recognize poisonous plants. To teach the young, even if just through mimicry, still was no paradise. It was a life ruled by instinct and survival, a world where every sunrise was a narrow escape from the night before, and every nightfall brought the whisper of death. So, when you look up at a monkey in the zoo or see a chimpanzee on TV, know that their ancestors came from a line of ancient fighters, apes who clawed their way through an unforgiving world. And for them, every day sucked, especially the nights. As the sun pierced through the dense canopy, ancient apes stirred slowly from restless sleep. But waking up didn't mean the suffering ended. Mornings brought their own fresh wave of challenges. Muscles ached from clinging to branches all night. Eyes scanned the forest for threats because every day was a new test of endurance. There was no such thing as safety, only temporary relief. Hunger always hit early. Ancient apes weren't lucky enough to have meals stored or cooked. They had to begin the daily search for food, and that was a dangerous race against time. Fruit ripened fast and disappeared even faster. Every creature in the forest wanted the same sweet reward. Birds plucked berries just out of reach. Rodents darted ahead and stripped branches clean. And worse, other apes, often stronger, arrived and took what they wanted. There was no fairness in the jungle. If you were small or slow, you starved. For females with infants clinging to their bellies, foraging was even harder. Every movement had to be calculated. Every leap from branch to branch risked sending the baby plummeting below. And because the baby never let go, the mother's body tired quickly. She couldn't swing as far. She couldn't run as fast. This made her vulnerable to both predators and to the cruelty of her own kind. Jealousy and violence were common. If a rival female wanted the attention of a high-ranking male, she might attack another mother. Sometimes it wasn't even personal, just dominance, a hard bite, a brutal shove. And if the infant slipped and fell, the forest didn't forgive. The baby wouldn't survive the landing. The grieving mother would still have to climb, still have to eat, still have to endure. Meanwhile, for the males, the day's stress was a constant performance. Their bodies needed to look strong. They had to act fearless, even when they were hungry, tired, or in pain. Posturing was everything. A slightly puffed chest, a louder hoot, a swat at a younger ape. These small acts helped avoid full-blown fights. But when posturing failed, real violence erupted. A single fight could leave an ancient ape bruised, bleeding, or worse, dethroned. Losing meant exile, and exile meant death. The group didn't take back losers. Wounds were serious in the jungle. There were no herbs or medicine. No one cleaned your cuts. A bite could fester. A scratch could swell. Insects swarmed to open skin, laying eggs. Parasites nestled in wounds. There was no way to explain the pain. No relief. You either healed on your own, or you didn't. Thirst was another cruel twist. While surrounded by greenery, fresh water wasn't always close. Apes had to climb down often to dangerous ground-level streams. There, they risked crocodiles, snakes, and large cats lurking in the bushes. Even the act of drinking became a gamble. And in dry seasons, water holes vanished. Then came the long, exhausting treks, farther from the trees, farther from safety, searching for puddles that might not exist. If they didn't find any, they would dehydrate slowly. Muscles would cramp, eyes would dull, and soon the body would stop climbing. And when you couldn't climb, you were done. Disease followed the apes wherever they went. Without sanitation, without understanding what illness even was, they suffered in silence. Fevers burned without warning. Bodies weakened. Diarrhea from rotten fruit or contaminated water would drain them. And all around them, the jungle kept moving. No one waited for the sick. Even their group might move on without them. To stay behind was to be forgotten. And not all suffering came from predators or wounds. Sometimes it came from nature's silence. There were days when the forest felt too quiet. The birds stopped chirping. The insects went still. That quiet wasn't peace. It meant a predator was near. A python waiting in the trees. A panther slinking through the undergrowth. Ancient apes had to freeze-hold their breath for the sound of leaves shifting just a little too much. And when it came time to flee, was pure chaos. The strong scattered. The weak tried to keep up. Mothers grabbed their babies and leaped blindly. In these moments, apes didn't worry about hierarchy or group loyalty. It was everybody for itself. The unlucky ones screamed, but their cries vanished into the foliage. And often, silence returned just as fast, only this time, someone was missing. As the sun climbed overhead, heat became the enemy. The canopy offered shade, but it also trapped humidity. Sweat didn't cool apes like it does humans today. They panted, they slumped, they still had to forage, still had to protect their place in the troop, still had to avoid threats. Its rest wasn't real. Rested was simply a pause between struggles. And through all this, the ancient ape's mind began to evolve, slowly, painfully. The fear etched lessons into their instincts. Patterns formed, recognizing safe trees, avoiding certain plants, watching the skies before moving. But evolution doesn't bring comfort, it brings responsibility. With growing awareness came new kinds of suffering, longer memories of trauma, deeper bonds that could be broken, and the early flickers of grief. So if you picture ancient apes lounging in the trees, peacefully munching banana sears, bad thought. Their lives were full of hardship, day after day, hour after hour. It wasn't a paradise, it was a gauntlet of survival. And they lived it without tools, without fire, and without the comfort of knowing why anything happened. For them, each morning was a miracle. Each night, a risk, and every moment in between. It kinda sucked. By midday, the sun sat directly overhead, pouring heat onto every leaf, vine, and creature below. For the ancient ape, the harsh light brought no kindness. It wasn't just the temperature that made the day miserable. It was the weight of exhaustion, dehydration, and the creeping sense that survival never took a break. Shade helped, but it wasn't always easy to find. The forest canopy could only do so much. When the sun broke through the gaps, it scorched exposed skin. Their patchy fur wasn't built to protect them for long. Sunburn wasn't a minor discomfort. It was a deep, burning sting that made every movement a fresh punishment. Still, they had to move. There was no such thing as staying in one place for too long. Danger crept in if they lingered. Other animals might stake a claim. Rival apes might challenge their presence. Even the trees themselves could betray them. Rot, parasites, or cracks in old branches could turn a resting spot into a trap. Every action had a cost. Searching for food meant risking a fall or running into a snake. Reaching for a higher branch might expose their belly to a hidden predator. Grabbing the wrong fruit could leave a bitter taste, or worse, poison. There were no guarantees. Every bite was a gamble. Even water, essential for life, was risky. Apes often had to descend from the safety of the trees to find streams or pools. But on the forest floor lurked the worst threats. Crocodiles, big cats, venomous snakes. Thirst could drive an ape to the edge of caution, forcing them to step closer to death just to drink. Group tensions only made things harder. Within their own troop, hierarchy ruled every interaction. A look held too long, a gesture made at the wrong time. It didn't take much to provoke a high-ranking ape. A slap, a bite, a scream. These were daily occurrences. Being at the bottom meant being a target, always, and grooming. The one act of calm in their day came with its own price. It wasn't just about cleaning fur. It was politics. You groomed those above you in rank. You ignored those below. If done wrong, it caused fights. If done well, it might earn temporary protection. But protection never lasted. For females with infants, the burden was heavier. Carrying a baby while foraging slowed them down. They couldn't move as quickly. They couldn't climb as far. And their young were always at risk. From falling, from predators, or even from other apes. Sometimes rival females attacked infants out of jealousy. Sometimes invading males killed them to force the mother back into heat. There was no comfort in motherhood, only responsibility mixed with fear. Males didn't fare much better. To mate, they had to constantly assert dominance. That meant fights, sometimes loud and fast, other times drawn out and brutal. Teeth bared, fur torn, blood spilled, and even when a male secured a dominant spot, it was never permanent. A younger, stronger challenger was always watching. The pressure never ended. As the day wore on, the sun's heat drained whatever strength they had left. Muscles ached, cuts and bruises throbbed, and still they had to keep going. The forest wouldn't wait. Fruit spoiled quickly. Water sources dried up. The moment you rested too long, you fell behind. And falling behind was dangerous. Those who lagged were the first to go missing, taken by leopards, bitten by vipers, or simply lost, unable to find the group again. Alone, the ancient ape had no chance. Their survival depended entirely on the troop, even if the troop often treated them harshly. As the light began to fade, the panic returned. Night was coming, and that meant building a nest. Again, high in the trees, balanced carefully on thin branches. It had to be strong enough to support their weight, and quick enough to build before darkness swallowed the forest. But good spots were limited. If they waited too long, they'd be stuck with a weak location, or worse, forced to build near danger. Every minute counted. Every stick and leaf had to be perfectly placed, and all while keeping an eye out for predators and aggressive troop members. Even after the nest was made, sleep didn't come easily. Their stomachs might still be empty, their wounds still fresh, their minds still buzzing with stress. Every rustle in the trees, every sudden gust of wind, every cry in the distance kept them on edge, because for the ancient ape, there were no days off, no real peace, just a cycle of pain, fear, and exhaustion. They didn't dream of better days. They didn't imagine the future. They only knew the next branch, the next fruit, the next threat. and they knew that tomorrow would hurt just as much as today. The sun was barely up, but the jungle was already alive. Branches shook with movement. Distant cries echoed through the trees. Insects buzzed relentlessly. For the ancient ape, the new day didn't bring hope. It brought another test of survival. There were no dreams to chase, only dangers to avoid. Waking up was slow and painful. The nest, barely held together with leaves and twigs, left their body sore and stiff. Any small branch that bent in the night made for awkward sleep, or no sleep at all. There was no comfort in the canopy, its only temporary shelter from the predators below. Even after opening their eyes, the ape didn't move right away. First came the listening, the scanning. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was suspicious. It's too quiet meant something was lurking. A big cat, a snake, even a rival troop. Sound meant life. No sound could mean death. When the jungle finally stirred, it was time to act. Hesitation was dangerous. Deer the apes were already foraging, moving quickly from tree to tree in search of the best fruit. Being too slow meant losing out. And if the fruit was already taken, the only choice was to keep moving deeper into the forest, away from safety and into unknown territory. And that was a gamble few apes wanted to make. The forest was dense. The deeper they went, the more unfamiliar the terrain. New trees, new smells, strange sounds. And the deeper they climbed, the more the air thickened with moisture. It became harder to breathe. The branches grew slick with damp moss. One wrong step, one misjudged leap, and it was a long way down. Falling wasn't just painful, it was often fatal. Broken limbs meant no climbing. No climbing meant no food, no escape, no hope. Even those who managed to stay high in the trees weren't safe. Ants marched in massive lines. Spiders spun webs between branches. Parasites clung to skin. Leeches dropped from above. Fleas burrowed into fur. The ape's body was never clean, always itching, always crawling with something unwanted. And grooming only helped so much. There wasn't time to clean properly. Most grooming was rushed, distracted, done while keeping one eye open for trouble. And if an ape spent too much time picking through fur, they risked missing food, falling behind, or offending someone in the group. Every action had a consequence. Even kindness had a cost. The social rules were endless and unforgiving. Eye contact had to be brief. Grunts had to be timed. Physical distance mattered. Too close meant a challenge. Too far meant disrespect. Higher-ranking apes expected submission. Lower-ranking ones couldn't show too much confidence. Navigating the troop's hierarchy was like walking a tightrope every hour of the day. One mistake, one misread signal, and a fight could break out. Bites, scratches, chases across branches. Screams that echoed through the trees. Even if the conflict didn't end in serious injury, it meant stress, panic, and sometimes exile. Apes that became too much trouble were pushed to the edges, forced to forage alone. Without the group's protection, they were exposed to every threat in the forest. Lone apes rarely survived for long. Even those still in the group weren't guaranteed safety, if a stronger ape decided to target them for a piece of fruit, for a mating opportunity, or simply out of boredom. There was no appeal, no justice, just acceptance, submission, and the hope that it ended quickly. And then came the hunger. Stomachs twisted, mouths dried. The fruit that did exist was often unripe, sour, or crawling with bugs. But the ape couldn't afford to be picky. They ate what they could. Chewed through tough bark, dug through soil for roots, picked through droppings left behind by other animals in hopes of finding seeds. It was never enough. The hours dragged on. The sun burned overhead. Muscles tired from endless climbing. Cuts reopened. Bites swelled. And still, there was no rest. To stop moving was to invite danger. To close their eyes was to risk everything. The jungle didn't care that they were tired. It never stopped watching. As the day stretched into the late afternoon, a distant call rang out. It was familiar, urgent, a warning. The group tensed. Heads turned, ears perked up. The call meant something was wrong. A predator nearby, a rival troop moving in, or maybe one of their own had fallen. It didn't matter what it was. It meant they had to move. In an instant, the canopy erupted. Apes leaped from branch to branch. Leaves scattered. Birds screeched and took flight. The forest turned into chaos, and in the panic, the weak were left behind. The young clung tighter. The mothers ran harder. The males bared their teeth and shouted into the trees. Eventually, the group stopped, regathered, counted silently with their eyes. Someone was missing. There was no search, no mourning, just silence, and then the slow return to routine. Because life for the ancient ape didn't pause for grief. The sun was still setting. A nest still had to be built. Tomorrow would still come, and it would suck just as much as today. The light began to dim, not suddenly, but slowly, in that creeping way that always felt too fast. The ancient ape could sense it, not just with its eyes, but with its instincts. The air shifted, the shadows stretched. The leaves above rustled a little differently. It was time to act, or be left exposed. Every evening meant the same ritual, building a nest before nightfall. It wasn't optional. Without a nest, there was nowhere safe to rest, no protection from the cold, no shield from falling, and no comfort at all. So they rushed. Hands grabbed twigs and leaves. Branches were bent, woven, packed together. The ape moved with purpose, but also desperation. The problem was that good spots were limited. The highest, sturdiest branches were already taken by dominant apes. Lower branches, closer to the ground, were riskier, easier for predators to reach, harder to defend. And once the light disappeared completely, building became near impossible. Sometimes they had to settle for a bad tree, a rotten limb, a cluster of insects, slope that made it hard to balance, but they had no choice. The forest didn't wait, and the dark didn't care if your nest was ready, so they curled into whatever they had, stiff, cramped, and exposed. The wind picked up as the sun vanished. It wasn't strong, but it cut through the trees just enough to chill the bones. Ancient apes didn't have blankets. Their fur helped, but it wasn't enough on colder nights. They huddled tight, wrapping their arms around themselves, or, if lucky, next to another body for warmth. But warmth brought its own risks. Sleeping too close meant trust, and trust was dangerous in a world built on dominance. A restless sleeper might shift too much. A startled reaction might start a fight, even in the dark. Some apes preferred to sleep alone, just to avoid that problem. But sleeping alone made them vulnerable. Every choice had consequences. The jungle never slept, even when the apes tried to. The world around them kept moving. Crickets screamed into the trees. Owls hooted above. The occasional roar or growl rolled in from the distance. Every sound cut through the silence like a knife, and every noise triggered the same reaction. Eyes snapping open, heart racing. Most nights were filled with broken sleep. A few minutes here, a shallow nap there. Slightest creak or snap of a branch could jolt them awake. And once they woke up, they didn't go back to sleep easily. The fear never fully left. It hovered, always. Some nights were worse than others. Storms came quickly. Rain hammered the leaves. Wind rocked the trees. Lightning flashed across the canopy. There was nowhere to hide. The nest soaked through in minutes. Water dripped onto their skin, down their spine, into their eyes. It's cold, wet, and shivering. They endured. There was nothing else to do. Climbing in the storm was nearly impossible. The branches became slick. Every movement risked a fall. But sometimes, if their nest was destroyed, they had to try. They had to rebuild. Even if it meant slipping, even if it meant tumbling into the blackness below. And if they fell, no one helped. There were no safety nets, no rescue missions, just the crash and silence. If they survived, they had to climb again, dragging their injured body back into the trees. If they didn't, their body disappeared into the underbrush. Another loss. Another reminder that the forest showed no mercy. Illness also made nights unbearable. Fevers worsened in the dark. Trembling, aching, gasping for breath, the ape would lie still, eyes barely open, unable to move, shivering in their nest, hoping for dawn. No medicine, no comfort. No one stayed behind to care for the sick. The group kept moving, and the sick were left behind. Parasites bit deeper at night. Fleas and lice spread faster in shared nests. Worms squirmed beneath the skin. Infections from earlier wounds began to swell. Pain throbbed in pulses with every heartbeat, but there was no way to cry out, no one to answer. They simply suffered in silence. Sometimes the ape would open its eyes and see stars through the trees. For a brief second, the sky seemed calm, peaceful, but even then, the ape didn't relax. Peace was never real in the jungle. It was just a pause between threats, a moment of stillness before the next disaster. The wind would shift. A predator would pass below. Another ape would scream in the distance, and the fear would return, always. And still, they survived. Not because life got easier, but because their bodies learned to endure. Their minds adapted, their instincts sharpened. They clung to trees with bleeding fingers. They nursed their wounds with dirt and time. They raised their young in a world that wanted them gone. The night passed slowly. The stars faded. The sky began to turn gray. And once again, the ancient ape blinked into the morning light, still alive, still breathing, still aching. A new day had arrived, and it was going to suck just as much as the last one. In the deep tangle of forest, hidden among the branches, a mother clung to life, and to something far more fragile, her infant, tiny, helpless, clinging with weak hands to her chest. It hadn't been long since the baby was born, but time didn't offer mercy, not to her, not to any of them. Giving birth as an ancient ape was a quiet war. No midwives, no soft ground, no comfort. The mother had gone into labor, high in the trees, balancing on unstable branches, trying not to fall, while her body convulsed with pain. The only way to survive was to hold on to branches and to breath until it ended. The baby didn't slip. If the tree didn't sway too hard, no predator heard the sound. But even after birth, the struggle had only just begun. The infant had to stay attached physically to her at all times, its tiny limbs wrapped around her fur, holding on as best it could. But newborns weren't strong. One slip during a climb, one poorly timed leap, and the baby would fall. And a fall from that height was always fatal. Mothers barely slept, not just because of fear, but because every twitch of the baby woke them. Every breath, every squirm, if the baby lost grip, it would fall silently into the dark, and the mother wouldn't even have time to reach out. Food became harder to find, not because there was less of it, but because she couldn't move as fast. She couldn't climb as far. Her hands were full. Her back ached. And while the others darted from tree to tree, she moved carefully, cautiously, slower, always slower. And the jungle punished slow. Fruits were snatched up before she arrived. Rivals shoved her aside. Higher-ranking apes took what they wanted. She couldn't fight them, not with the baby clinging to her. One shove might knock the infant loose, so she took the scraps, bitter fruit, hard seeds, bark. The baby needed milk, but her body needed food to make it. The less she ate, the weaker she became. The weaker she became, the less milk she could give. It was a vicious circle, one that ended in starvation for one of them or both. Other mothers weren't allies, they were competition. They protected their own babies. Sometimes they pushed hers away. If she got too close to a prized fruit tree, she might be bitten, threatened, forced to back down while her baby whimpered in hunger. Then there were the males. Some were indifferent, some were dangerous. A dominant male might see a newborn that wasn't his and decide to kill it, not out of rage, but because it brought the mother back into heat. More mating, more chances to spread his bloodline. It was instinct, brutal, cold, common. There was no way to stop it. If a male approached, the mother would flee, climbing frantically, baby clutched tight, heart racing. But if he was faster or stronger, he would rip the infant from her chest, and that would be the end. The group didn't stop for her. No one helped. There was no comforting touch, no grieving ritual. She was expected to move on, even with her arms empty. Sometimes it wasn't a male. Sometimes it was another female, a jealous one, a rival. If food was scarce or space limited, they might push, bite, strike the baby, and walk away. The mother couldn't fight back, not unless she wanted to lose everything. Still, she tried. She carried the infant every day through storms, through hunger, through pain. She built nests that were slightly more stable. She chose branches with fewer predators. She groomed her baby's fur with her teeth, picking away bugs, removing thorns, keeping its skin clean the only way she knew how. But nature didn't care. Infections happened. Bites festered. Fever set in. Cough could become something worse, and there was nothing she could do but hold it, rock it, hope. She couldn't call for help, couldn't make medicine, couldn't understand why the infant stopped moving one day. The pain of that moment, sitting in a nest high above the world, holding a still, silent body, was something no one acknowledged. She still had to move, still had to climb, still had to survive. The group wouldn't wait. The body would be left behind. The mother might search for days after, looking in nests, watching the wind move the leaves, listening for a sound she would never hear again. But the forest gave no answers. It never did. For those who managed to raise a baby to its first year, there was no celebration, just more danger. The young would now begin to climb on its own, slipping, wandering, getting into trouble, and the cycle of fear started again. A lifetime of watching, of guarding, of never resting. Because motherhood in the jungle wasn't nurturing, it was relentless. To raise a child was to carry it through fire, without knowing if the fire would ever end. And for the ancient ape, that fire burned every single day. Raising a child in the jungle was hard enough, but even reaching adulthood didn't make life easier. Once an ancient ape survived infancy, dodged predators, and grew strong enough to move on its own, a new nightmare began. Adolescence. Young apes were awkward, not strong enough to fight, not small enough to be carried. They lived in a dangerous in-between, expected to forage for themselves, climb like adults, follow the group without slowing it down, but also expected to stay out of the way, especially when tempers rose. Older apes had little patience for them. A young male might accidentally bump into a dominant adult. That alone could earn him a vicious bite or a slap across the face. He'd be chased off for being too close. Even if he hadn't done anything wrong, he'd learn to lower his eyes, to hunch his shoulders, to avoid every sign of challenge. One wrong move, and he could be exiled, or worse. Young females weren't spared either. As they got older, their bodies became a different kind of target. Not for violence at first, but for attention. Males would begin to follow, sniff, pull at their fur, show off with loud calls and chest-beating displays. The female didn't respond correctly. If she ran, if she resisted, she could be punished. No one asked if she was ready. Mating in the ancient world wasn't about love. It wasn't even about choice. It was survival through instinct. Dominance meant everything. If a male could overpower others, he took what he wanted, including mates, including space, including food. The jungle didn't offer privacy. No corner of the forest was truly hidden, no act unseen. The rest of the group might look away, not out of shame, but because it happened all the time. It was normal to them, routine, the way things were. By the time a young ape reached full maturity, their body was covered in scars, physical and emotional, teeth marks, scratches, the memory of falls, the loss of siblings, the trauma of nights spent alone. There was no gentle transition into adulthood. You were either strong enough to endure, or you weren't. And even then, life got worse. Becoming an adult meant constant vigilance, constant fighting for a place. If you were a male, you had to challenge others for status. That meant threatening higher-ranking apes, pushing them aside, making loud noises, stealing food, intimidating others, all while staying alert for retaliation. Losing a challenge was humiliating. The high-ranking ape wouldn't just defeat you. He would make sure the group saw it. He'd chase you through the trees, rip out chunks of your fur, corner you, and leave you bleeding. After that, you'd eat last, if at all, sleep farthest from the others, and be picked on by those who now saw you as weak. If you challenged again and lost, you might be pushed out for good. Exile meant death. Without a group, you were vulnerable to every predator. You couldn't defend yourself. You couldn't find enough food. And even if you managed to survive alone, other groups would never accept you easily. They'd scream, fight, bite. You were always an outsider. Females faced their own torment. They became pregnant. The trouble only grew. Pregnancy weakened them, slowed them down, left them exposed. And once they gave birth, the same cycle began again. Fear, loss, hunger, exhaustion. Over and over. There was no old age to look forward to. Very few ancient apes lived long enough to grow old. If they did, their teeth wore down, their vision dimmed, their grip weakened, and when they couldn't climb anymore or keep up with the group, they were left behind. No goodbyes, no caretaking, just silence. The jungle took care of the rest. Even without predators, an old ape would slowly starve. Bugs would crawl into their wounds. Their body would grow stiff. Rain would soak them to the bone. And eventually, they would fall from their perch, unable to hold on any longer. Their body would disappear into the undergrowth. Then nothing would mark the place where they once lived. There were no stories told. No one remembered the names of the dead. Their bones were scattered, trampled, forgotten, just like the thousands that came before them. This was the fate of every ancient ape. From the moment they were born to the moment they slipped into the dirt, their life was pain, fear, and silence. A never-ending loop of survival with no reward at the end, no comfort, no meaning, just instincts and suffering. And in that world, even the strong couldn't win forever, because eventually every branch broke and every hand slipped. And every ape, no matter how powerful, fell. There was no legacy for the ancient ape. It left behind no words and no traditions, just footprints that vanished with the rain. Nothing was passed on except struggle and instinct. Each new ape began life without guidance. There were no elders to teach, no memories recorded, no accumulated wisdom to soften the edge of survival. Every generation had to learn the same painful lessons all over again. Instinct could only go so far. It warned them of predators and helped them find fruit, but it didn't prepare them for sudden changes. One storm, one illness, or one unfamiliar tree could still destroy them. Even the strong couldn't rely on their strength forever. They ruled for a while, ate first, and chose where to sleep. But one misstep could change everything. A fall, an infection, or a rival could take it all away. Survival was never about thriving. It was just about not dying. Not yet. Not today. Each breath was borrowed time. They had no tools beyond what nature gave them. Sometimes a stick, sometimes a stone, but they used them without true understanding. There was no practice, no improvement, only guesswork. Fire remained a mystery. They saw it when lightning struck trees, and it terrified them, glowing and hissing in the darkness. They never dared approach it, only watched from the shadows and fled when it grew too close. Weather controlled their lives without mercy. When rain came, it soaked their nests and fur, making sleep even more miserable and dangerous. Cold wind cut through their bodies and left them shivering for hours. Their nests were fragile and temporary, built in minutes and destroyed in seconds. They were barely enough to keep them off the ground. One strong breeze or restless movement could send them tumbling into darkness. Grooming was their closest thing to peace, calmed their nerves and built weak bonds between individuals, but even that came with risk. Groom too hard, too long, or touch the wrong ape, and a fight could break out. They remembered faces and sounds. They knew who had hurt them and who shared food once, but they didn't know why anything really happened. The concept of cause and consequence was still foggy in their minds. They couldn't plan ahead, didn't store food, or build for the future. Each decision was for the moment, and the moment alone. Sleep was never safe. They rested in short bursts, always halfway between waking and dreaming. Every rustle or creak pulled them back into fear. The jungle around them was alive and hostile. It wasn't just the animals that posed danger. It was the very forest itself. Thorns tore their skin, vines trapped their limbs, and trees collapsed without warning. Insects crawled into their fur and laid eggs beneath their skin. Parasites drained their strength slowly, while wounds festered in silence. No one noticed until it was too late, and even then, no one helped. Even their own group was a source of suffering. They needed each other to survive, but that didn't mean they trusted or supported one another. Conflict was constant, and alliances meant nothing if hunger struck. Being strong made you a target. Dominance meant constant threats from challengers who wanted your place, and one injury could bring your downfall. Weakness, however, meant being ignored or punished by everyone else. There was no way to win. Whether you were top of the group or bottom, life never stopped testing you. Even brief moments of peace were interrupted by the next crisis. Nothing was fair. A mother could do everything right and still lose her infant. A careful climber could still fall from a rotten branch. No explanation ever came. There were no gods to blame, no stories to make sense of the pain, just silence and fear. But in that silence, something small was starting to grow. Not hope, not yet, but awareness. The first flicker of curiosity began to take shape. Some apes hesitated before acting. Some watched and waited instead of reacting instantly. Tiny pauses were seeds for something much greater. A new mind was beginning to form. It's one that could question, wonder, and remember more clearly. A mind that might one day lead to something better. It wouldn't happen for millions of years. Evolution moved slowly, with more suffering than progress. But the foundation was being built in blood, fear, and broken branches. The ancient ape had no idea it was part of something bigger. It didn't know its struggle would shape the path of future creatures. It only knew it hurt. That night, as stars returned above the treetops, the ape sat in its nest. Its stomach was empty, its limbs were sore, and its child trembled silently against its chest. The wind passed through the leaves and whispered nothing in return. It had survived another day, but survival didn't feel like victory. It just meant tomorrow would hurt again. There were no dreams, only the weight of exhaustion and the dread of what came next. And for the ancient ape, that was life. A long, quiet battle with no reward, just pain, and the fading hope that something might change one day. Life as an ancient ape was not the peaceful jungle dream we often imagine. It was raw, relentless, and full of suffering. From the moment they were born, these early primates were thrown into a world that showed no mercy. Every branch was a risk. Every meal was a fight. Every night was a gamble between sleep and survival. There was no safety, no structure, and no support beyond instinct. Mothers risked everything just to raise their young, often losing them to predators, falls, or starvation. The social groups they relied on for protection also brought danger. Dominance, aggression, jealousy, and exile were constant threats. Not grand, not graceful, just a tired, injured creature clinging to a tree, hoping it could make it through the night. These small changes were the first sparks of thought, the roots of everything that would one day become human. They didn't get stories written about them. They didn't pass down lessons. They just survived, and sometimes that was the only victory. They didn't know it, but every miserable climb, every desperate scream, every hard-won bite of fruit was shaping the mind of the future. Trust was fragile. Comfort was rare. Injuries didn't heal with help. Illness didn't lead to care. An infected cut, a broken finger, or a bad fall could mean the end. Okay? They had no words, no way to explain their pain, no reason to hope things would get better. And they didn't know they were slowly becoming something else, something more. But deep inside those early apes, something had begun to shift. A longer memory, a quicker hand, a slower breath before decision. Still, the life they lived was harsh, was full of noise and silence, blood and dirt, loss and fear. So when we think about where we came from, about the billions of years it took to get here, it's worth remembering what those first steps looked like. Not grand, not graceful, just a tired, injured creature clinging to a tree, hoping it could make it through the night. And somehow it did, again and again, until one day we did too.